Pretty sure last episode might have been the most intense episode in the series in a long time. And in a lot of ways, other than just obviously a hype fight, but the way they emphasized and boosted a lot of the Mercphobia fight was really good. For me, though, one of the things I noticed in the anime was they changed a bit about how Natsu's form worked and how Natsu's fire was kind of all set up. Because I noticed that they, I saw other people notice there were parts when Natsu has his fire kind of just trailing off him and that black red kind of energy trailing off him, and they didn't really do that in the anime. They changed it to be almost more of like it's embedded into his skin, which is really interesting. And part of that is when we first see the form, we get the, obviously, like I said, that color. We know it's obviously drawn in the manga, it's black, but we know from the anime and obviously just general colorings of it that it's actually like a really dark red. But with the cover of volume 3, we were shown that Natsu's scales were red. And I don't want to zoom in too much. If you look at obviously Natsu's hand in the top right corner of the manga panel, it's like you see the scales under it, and then there's the, the dark red coloring and heat, whatever, fire, smoke, whatever it's generally supposed to be, ethereal powers, whatnot. It's obviously it's not smoke. I feel like if we smoke, it would just be like the whole screen would just be black. I'm just like trying to think, obviously, would black and red color combination, is it just going to be just for fun? Obviously just colors, but as it were, it's shown in the manga, because if you look at the volume cover, then look at the manga coloring. Oh, okay, well, it's just they, in black and white, you're going to get what looks like black coloring on his hands and white scales, but that's just because of the manga being black and white. Looking at the volume cover, it's like, okay, you see Natsu's scales must be red, and then knowing what E&D's colors were like, that must be the dark red coloring on it, as well as what we see in just how it's differently colored than his normal fire. And the reason why that's really interesting is it's different in the manga, or in the anime rather, and this is the screenshot that I think best kind of shows it, is, and this is one thing that's really important to mention is too, is Mishima did a lot of oversight into the season, and they did update things like Ignia's original design was just not used. They're using the updated version that we got later in the Doggermag arc. I won't talk too much into it, because obviously this is not going to go into too much into spoilers. The whole Dogger Labyrinth, I won't give context to it, but as it were, I would assume that Mishima obviously saw this beforehand, had any oversight of things, and anything that they've added or altered, he's had some say in it. I think that just makes sense. He's been doing that in the anime pretty much for the most part through season 1, and then everything after, like the Daphne stuff, I'm pretty sure he's had a lot more hands-on and input into. But that's interesting because instead of it being the color, the ethereal stuff layered on top of red scales, it seems more of his scales on the portions where his ethereal aspects are black. And I'm not black, sorry, the black red. I'm not going to argue with anybody at this point. I feel like the anime made it even clearer that this is his ethereal side. Like, it's even more so obvious with like the way that the shadowing around the eyes is, the claws, like this is just personality. The color of the flames is much cooler, and obviously in 100 Years Quest anime with like the orange black and then the dark red kind of mixed in there, pretty sick. But why I think that's really interesting is because in the manga version, like I said, it's red scales with the ethereal stuff layered on top of it. And in the anime, it looks more like his hands are the ethereal hands, and then he's using Dragon Force. So instead of red scales, in this form, he's going to have these dark red, almost black scales. And that tells me, again, the big kind of like following of this, why I wanted to kind of like connect any points of both canon, the differences anime and manga, and why exactly it makes sense, is I believe that this is again the sign that the demon seed and the dragon seed are merging and fusing inside of Natsu's body, because logically, as it were before, if it's essentially kind of like, what is it, like Goku's Super Saiyan Blue and Kaioken. He's using a form on top of a form, and then he's using another thing on top of it. So he's actively having these things at the same time, which is kind of like how it is more in the manga. But in the anime, it's more of like these things are combined, because it's not two powers separately. It looks more of he's got the Ethereus powers active, then using Dragon Force. So he's applying the dragonification aspect onto a demon altered body with his hands, and that's why it's making these dark red scales. Again, very interesting in changing, because again, we already had a change in this bit with Ignia's design. We know that Mishima has altered stuff in the anime, and that's not something that is unheard of. There are a lot of the weekly mangaka that have, like, the big guys that have had a lot of input in their anime. I'd say I'm pretty sure with Bleach, like, it's more of like Thousand Year Blood War. I know with Oda and Wano, Mishima has like a lot of parts where he's done a lot of oversight, and then sections where he's just given them the story, like with the anime filler arcs. And then I know Black Clover too, but it's nothing that is uncommon. I feel like it's way more common in the modern era than it was, 20 years ago. I don't know that like Kishimoto doesn't do it all the time. I know Toriyama didn't do it all the time. I know that there are times where they would, but it wasn't always. But I feel like on times when they do, things like this are not just done for no reason. There's a logical reason of why exactly it's been changed. And we know from just the structure of it that Natsu would get both back, because clearly his Ethereus side is still there. The rest of the book, logically, as I've mentioned in some other videos, re-merged in with him entirely instead of just the portion that he got before. And then the Dragon Seed would always reform by using and pushing dragon slaying magic. So, and Natsu's only real way of ever fully preventing that would be to not do things that would further progress these two seeds, but he does it anyway because of what's going on in the story, and just the threshold of power he needs to eventually break in order to 1v1 Ignia at some point. We're probably going to get to see it again in this arc. I really liked the ideas in some of the older arcs. I say older, it's like a couple arcs ago. Of how you could have had it like with Dogremag. Maybe he thinks that he killed either Suzaku or maybe one of his friends, and that puts him into it. Or with Viernes, you could have done something with like using a copy of Igniel, or something with maybe with a concept embodiment of Lucy, and then he kills it. I'm just trying to think of things that would drive him over the edge. But with Ignia, it's kind of different, because Natsu, if he fights Ignia, any point where he eats his flames, he might just be pushed into this state, and there's nothing he can do about it. And with the other guys, it's obviously different when he's doing attribute versus different attribute, but when he's fighting a guy of the same attribute, I imagine it's going to be really difficult for him not to want to do it. And it's going to be one of those things where I know this is a completely different thing to grab at, but like, what is it, like Elden Ring? Melania not wanting to use any of the Scarlet Rot powers, and then she gets to a point where she just is like about to lose, and she ends up doing it anyway. I think that'd be cool if Natsu gets pushed to a point where he has to take in the fire, and we see that form come out. Almost like a combination of what we had earlier, and kind of like Ichigo versus Ulquiorra, and just that kind of like moment where it's the main character is at a point where they don't care at all about their own state, and it's more about like they gotta move and they gotta make a decision now. One of those just all in, get their moments. We'll see. This is a really intriguing thing right now, because Ignia presents such a very interesting foil to Natsu, and now he has like a whole point where like Natsu can't eat his fire without putting himself in this dangerous state where he loses control. Very, very intriguing for like how things are going to go out. And like I said, like the Ignia arc and Ignia content is always and ends up being the most hype stuff. It's really crazy. I hope we get really good stuff with all the dragon gods, though. We don't need to talk too much about like the length of the anime, but I mean, as we are right now, the first bit that I really wanted to see not only ended up delivering really hard, but ended up presenting with us with something that I think is very intriguing, and something that ends up changing a little bit of what we're looking at, because maybe that's for me, and I don't want to go too much into again spoilers, but if maybe that's why we don't really see the state in later arcs, and with this it's more of like, oh, I wanted this to get out and be seen without just like somehow dropping a retcon, or having to bring it up again in the chapter. It's like, okay, anybody that's now seen this knows more of what we should be expecting potentially. I really don't think it's just a coincidence, because it showed and emphasized like seeing the scales, and then we see Natsu get the flesh scales. I would imagine anywhere where this black portion, black, red, dark red, whatever, grows to, instead of those flesh scales, they would end up being this color. Because logically, otherwise, it would be the red. But I think that in the difference of this, it's going to be the flesh scales, and then that bit runs over, and you're going to get just more of this demonic dark red dragon kind of look. I don't know. It's looking pretty hype. We'll see. We'll see how things go. I was not expecting to make a video relating to a crazy anime alteration connection theory, but I'm very intrigued. I know I keep saying kind of like, yeah, I'm intrigued, man. It's intriguing. It's very interesting. It's because it's like the raw level of, is this something to really kind of take note on, versus like, oh yeah, something brand new in the manga, versus, huh. I don't think it's a coincidence, or like a just like a funny like alteration they do that just looks cool and might work with something. I feel like this is very intentional, because otherwise it's like, why would we not just do the form that was already there? Why did they alter something but then emphasize in the difference of the change in how it is? We see clearly these are scales. These aren't, you know, it's not like he's got a fire design here. It's not like it's like that kind of like swirling black seared ash that it is in the manga. It's specifically showing that anywhere right here where he would otherwise have scales on his forearms, red scales rather, he has these dark, really dark red ones. So I know I've rambled a little bit longer. I wanted to make this like 8 minutes, but I'm so interested to see what everybody else's opinions are on this. I haven't talked about it too much, and I really wanted to kind of look over this before I ended up talking about it, because this is, again, one of those theories, and this is the last thing I'll say, I'm sorry if it ends up droning on, is it's such an extra theory that I'm so excited to see where this might lead to. So we'll just wait a little bit, see where it goes in the arc. Maybe once we see a couple more dragon fights, we'll see this kind of bit of Natsu kind of come out. Or I don't know what to kind of come out. I just want to see some form of chapter where things suddenly go really badly, and it seems like, oh, well, where is this going? Okay, where were they going to turn around? The next chapter, things get worse. Maybe the chapter or two later, things get worse. And then it's just this kind of building momentum of, well, dang, like, when are they going to turn things around? And it's not a happy turn things around. It's like a, we've unleashed Pandora's box kind of moment. But we'll see. Anyway, other than that, comment below. Oh, see, my dog's hyped about it too. Tell me what your thoughts are about this, and if you think this is just an anime thing, or you think this is an intentional thing, and what do you think of this potential confirmation of this form, instead of just being a red dragon with whatever, I guess, ethereal hands, it is going to be a fully fused potential form. Right, other than that, like I said, thumbs up the video for like and subscribe and check out other videos. Been that, appreciate it. Subscribe, and thank you all for listening. Bye.